Bloomberg.
Mr. President, following up on your comments on China and the economy, you recently called China's economy a ticking time bomb. Do you believe the country's slowdown could risk destabilizing the global economy or causing China to be more aggressive defensively, including
Say the first part of your question again, because this fan is going on loudly behind me.
No worries. Do you believe the country's slowdown in growth could risk destabilizing the global economy or cause China to be more aggressive defensively, including with Taiwan? And separately, sir, are you worried about the meeting between President Putin and Kim Jong-un, if that could mean Russia has more gains in the war in Ukraine?
Look, I think China has a difficult economic problem right now for a whole range of reasons that relate to international growth and lack thereof, and the policies that China has followed. And so I don't think it's going to cause China to invade Taiwan. As a matter of fact, the opposite, probably doesn't have the same capacity that it had before. But as I said, we're not looking to hurt China, sincerely. We're all better off if China does well. China does well by the international rules, grows the economy. But they have had some real difficulty in terms of their economy of late, particularly in real estate, that end of the bargain. And I think the actions that they're going to have to take are ones that they're in the process of deciding right now. And I'm not going to predict what way will come out, but we're not looking to decouple from China. What I'm not going to do is I'm not going to sell China material that would enhance their capacity to make more nuclear weapons, to engage in defense activities that are contrary to what is viewed as most people think is a positive development in the region. And but we're not trying to hurt China. Okay, BBC, Laura? Am I correct? Is that correct, Laura?
It is. My name is Laura Bicker. I'm from BBC News. Good evening, Mr. President.
Good
How
evening.
are you?
Well, thank you.
Good.
These 5-day trips around the world are no problem.
I can imagine. It is evening, I'd like to remind you. I mean, in the last 6 months, you've signed pacts and deals with Japan, South Korea, Philippines, Australia, even the Pacific Islands. You're here standing in Beijing's backyard. Now, China says this is part of your Cold War mentality. Are they right, sir? Are they right, Mr. President? Is there a danger of a Cold War? And when will you meet Mr. Xi?
Well, I hope I get to see Mr. Xi sooner than later. I've spent more time with him than any other world leader has, sum total, over the last 12 years. So I hope we get to see him again soon. But, no, look, for example, one of the things we did in India, we provided for a new path that's going to save everybody money, increase the global South's capacity to grow by sending. We're going to have a new railroad from India all the way across to the Mediterranean, shipping lanes and pipelines across the Mediterranean through Europe up into Great Britain and beyond. That's all about economic growth. It has nothing to do with hurting China or helping China. It has to do with dealing with everything from climate change to making sure that these countries can succeed economically and grow. Look, my thesis has been from the beginning, both domestically and in terms of foreign policy, invest in your people. Invest in the people. Give them a chance. Everything's better off when people, it's going to sound trite, if everybody in the world had a job they got up in the morning and wanted to go to and thought they could put 3 squares on the table for their family no matter where they live, the whole world would be better off. It would be a lot better. That's the notion here behind this. For example, you know, one of the things we're doing in terms of, I proposed a long time ago at the G7, now it's going to come to fruition at the G20, is making sure that we build a railroad all the way across the African continent. Think about it. There is no way to cross the African continent by road, by rail, and there's not even a direct highway across. Now let's assume for the sake of discussion, we talk about food shortages. Assume there was one country in that vast continent that had an excess of foodstuffs and resources. How would they get it to where they're going to go? How are they going to do it? That's why we're also going to invest billions of dollars in solar facilities in Angola to have the largest solar facility in the world, or among the largest. That helps Angola, but also helps the whole region. So I think we think too much in terms of Cold War terms. It's not about that. It's about generating economic growth and stability in all parts of the world. And that's what we're trying to do. Sorry. Okay. Am I pronouncing it Avilia? Did I pronounce the name correctly? There you are.
Yes, yes. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank
It's
you.
Aurelia and for AFP. I had a question on the climate crisis. You just mentioned the G20. Just this week, the United States warned that if there is no phasing out of fossil fuels, it won't be possible to reach the goals of the Paris Agreement. There was no agreement at the G20 on fossil fuels. How concerned are you about this lack of consensus?
It wasn't so much an agreement that we would try to meet the goals of G20. The United States is going to meet those goals, by the way. We're going to exceed those goals. A lot of other countries are as well. But we want to give those countries that don't have the economic wherewithal and did not cause the problem in the first place. For example, I met with Lula in Brazil. I started off way back in the 80s with a really fine Republican senator named Dick Lugar. We said, here's what we're going to do. If you owe us money, we're going to forgive your debt if you maintain your forest, because they become carbon sinks. They're the things that take carbon out of the air. And so we're talking to what we should be and the countries that cleared their land and put cattle on it and farming and did all the things that increased development. They, in fact, are the main reason why we've gotten as far down the road to disaster here as we have. And so it seems that if we have the economic capacity, those nations, should be getting together and providing help for the nations that don't have the wherewithal to do it. The economic wherewithal and the infrastructure wherewithal. And that's why, for example, I mentioned, in the interest of time, I just mentioned Angola again. Angola has the capacity to generate megawatts of energy through solar energy. They don't have the economic means to do that. Isn't it in the interest of the whole world if they're in fact able to generate significant capacity to absorb, to prevent carbon from being released in the air? I think it is. So what we're trying to do is help those nations, particularly in the global south, where they're not as wealthy, where there are not as many opportunities, to be able to deal with the things that they want to deal with. For example, and I'll end with this, there is more carbon absorbed from the atmosphere on a daily basis, and I'll look to my friend John Kerry, and forgotten more about this than most people know. Correct me if I get this wrong, John, but I'm quite sure I'm right. And that is that there's more carbon absorbed from the air into the Amazon region, into the ground, than admitted in the entire United States on the same basis. Now imagine if people go in and do what we did 150, 250 years ago, and cut down the forest and start farming in that area. No longer have that great carbon sink. It would be a gigantic problem. So we should be going to areas, whether it's in the Congo or other places, as the G7 nations and the wealthy G20 nations, though, and providing the kind of infrastructure they need to be able to benefit. And guess what? In addition to helping the environment overall, and the only existential threat humanity faces, even more frightening than a nuclear war, is global warming going above 1.5 degrees in the next 10 years. It'd be real trouble. There's no way back from that. And so there's a lot we can do in the meantime. For example, that pipeline, or that railroad we're talking about going across from India throughout the Middle East and across the Mediterranean and all through Europe, that's going to have hydrogen pipeline there. This is going to significantly reduce the amount of carbon emitted in the air, but it costs a lot of money to put that down. And the world's going to say it's in our interest, collective interest, to do it. So I have not given up at all on the notion that we're going to be able to, how can I say it? I think we can triple the renewable capacity for, as it relates to global warming, by the year 2030. Countries following the IRA playbook, which is the one we passed, clean energy jobs are going to create manufacturing jobs. For example, as a consequence of what we've done, we have the strongest economy in the world today. Right now, today, the United States of America has the strongest economy in the world. In the world. Now, we've got more to do, but we have the strongest economy in the world. And one of the reasons we're doing it, we changed the mechanism how we deal with this. And that is, instead of trickle-down economy, that is, if the wealthy and the corporations do very well, everybody's going to do well. Well, the truth of the matter is, I've never bought that theory, but I think the times have changed, and a lot of leading economists are beginning to agree with me. Just flat, straight-out academic economists. And that is, we should build economic growth from the middle out and the bottom up. When that happens, everybody does well. Everybody does well. The wealthy still do very, very well. They have no problem. You can still be a billionaire under that system as well. But you're going to start paying your taxes if I have anything to do with it. That's a different issue. But all kidding aside, so I think the other thing is dawning on people. Many of you are foreign policy experts, have been engaged for a long time. Did you ever think you'd be sitting at a G20 conference where everyone was preoccupied with the notion of global warming? Not a joke. Did you ever think that? And there's my brother loves there's famous lines from movies that he always quotes, and one of them is there's a movie about John Wayne. He's an Indian scout, and they're trying to get I think it was the Apache, one of the great tribes of America, back on the reservation, and he's standing with the Union. So they're all on their horses and their saddles, and there's 3 or 4 Indians in headdresses, and the Union soldiers. The Union soldiers basically saying to the Indians, "Come with me. We'll take care of you. Everything will be good." And the Indian looks at John Wayne and points to the Union soldier and says, "He's a lion, dog-faced pony soldier." Well, there's a lot of lion, dog-faced pony soldiers out there about global warming, but not anymore. All of a sudden, they're all realizing it's a problem. And there's nothing like seeing the light. Let's see. I'm just following my orders here. Staff, if anybody haven't spoken, no, I ain't calling on you. I'm calling on, I said I had 5 questions. Anita from VOA.
Thank you, Mr. President. I hope you didn't think that calling only on women would get you softballs tonight.
Oh, I know better than that.
Okay, well, let me start with President Xi.
If you send me a softball, I wouldn't know what to do with it. I'd probably strike out even worse.
Well, let me ask you about, you've spent lots of time talking about all the time you spent with President Xi and the importance of leader-to-leader communication, yet you two haven't spoken in 10 months. And I just wonder, are you worried that this is destabilizing the U.S.-China relationship, and what are you going to do about it? And then, if I may, on Ukraine, sir, Kiev is upset that the G20 communique didn't name Russia as the aggressor. Have you managed to rally more support or sympathy across the G20, or is this emerging as a wedge issue with the Global South? And does that change your commitment to Ukraine?
It's not a wedge issue with the Global South. It's a wedge issue with Russia, which is present, and with China, which is present, has representation. And and by the way, I am, my team, my staff still meets with President Xi's people and his cabinet in effect. I met with his number 2 person here in India today. So it's not like there's a crisis if I don't personally speak to him. It'd be better if I did. But I think, look, this is not a criticism. It's an observation. He has his hands full right now. He has overwhelming unemployment with his youth. One of the major economic tenets of his plan isn't working at all right now. I'm not happy for that, but it's not working. So he's trying to figure out, I suspect, I don't know, just like I would, trying to figure out what to do about the particular crisis they're having now. But I don't think it's a crisis relating to conflict between China and the United States. As a matter of fact, I think it's less likely to cause that kind of conflict. I don't, anyway, I just think that there are other things on leaders' minds, and they respond to what's needed at the time. And look, nobody likes having celebrated international meetings if you don't know what you want at the meeting, if you don't have a game plan. He may have a game plan. He just hasn't shared it with me. But I tell you what, I don't know about you, but I'm going to go to bed. Yeah, we talked about at the conference overall. We talked about stability. We talked about making sure that the third world, the southern hemisphere had access to changes, had access. It wasn't confrontational at all. You came up with
Thank you, everybody. This ends the press conference. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.